Hello, friends. We are moving on in our study of the Gospels. And in this section we're doing today, we're going to cover a Sabbath controversy. This is the third Sabbath controversy that took place in a synagogue where Jesus was teaching. He was going to share the word of the Torah on a Sabbath. And this story is in Luke 6, verse 6. A man was in the assembly who happened to have a withered hand. This was a medical problem, but not life-threatening, certainly. Again, Luke's profession of doctor becomes evident. Both Matthew and Mark simply state that the man's hand was withered. And that's in Matthew chapter 12, verse 10, and Mark chapter 3, verse 1. However, Dr. Luke specified that it was the right hand that was deformed. It appears that the man was a plant for the purpose of entrapment, because some in the audience asked, quote, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath day?" Their goal was that they might accuse him. And Matthew chapter 12, verse 10 says that they might accuse him. Luke specifies, quote, "And the scribes and Pharisees watched him closely whether he would heal on the Sabbath, that they may find an accusation against him." Clearly, the man with the withered hand did not just happen to be there. Healing was an act of mercy, as Jesus explained. Therefore, it did not violate the law to do on a Sabbath. Having made his point, Jesus proceeded to heal the man's hand. By doing so, he contradicted Pharisaic authority. The wording of Mark chapter 3, verse 5 implies that Jesus did this in spite of them. In other words, to spite them. Quote, "And when he had looked around at them in anger, being grieved by the hardness of their hearts, he said to the man, 'Stretch out your hand.' And he stretched it out, and his hand was restored, as whole as the other." Jesus healed by simply giving an order. The Messiah did not ask the man if he believed or had faith, because at this point, faith was not essential or a prerequisite to healing. Although the man was a plant, Jesus went ahead and healed him, because at this point in his ministry, his miracles were to authenticate his messianic claims. The Pharisaic response to this incident and to the Sabbath controversy was threefold. First, the religious leaders were, quote, "filled with rage." That's Luke chapter 6, verse 11. They allowed the emotion of anger to overtake them, and as a result, they could no longer think logically or rationally. Second, quote, "the Pharisees went out and took counsel against him, how they might destroy him." That's Matthew 12, verse 14. They conspired, they plotted how to be rid of Jesus in one form or another, and how to reject his messiahship in spite of his very special abilities. Third, quote, "the Pharisees went out and immediately plotted with the Herodians against him, how they might destroy him." That's Mark chapter 3, verse 6. The Pharisees joined with the Herodians in their conspiracy against Jesus. Even though they were at the opposite ends of the political spectrum and bitter enemies towards each other, The Pharisees were opposed to Roman law and rule in any form, while the Herodians favored it if it came through the house of Herod. Yet on the issue of Jesus, they had a common goal. The next section includes more experiences of Jesus regarding his authority to heal. First, Mark points out three things. First, in Mark 3, verses 7 to 8, at this point, Jesus' reputation had spread not only throughout the country, but also to areas outside, including Gentile territory, such as Idumea, which is south of Judah, and Tyre and Sidon, which is north of Galilee. The second point Mark makes in Mark chapter 3, verses 9 to 10, is that masses of people thronged about him, Jesus, seeking to benefit from his healing ministry. Third, demons continued to recognize his authority, but then declared who Jesus was. Jesus still would not accept their testimony and commanded them to keep silent. That's Mark chapter 3, verses 11 to 12. In Matthew's passage, in Matthew chapter 12, verse 18 to 21, is a direct quote from Isaiah 42, verses 1 to 2, which is a prophecy of the nature of the Messiah's ministry during his first coming. We remember the term pardes, the four categories of rabbinic quotation, and how the New Testament quotes the Old. This is an example of the first category, P, Pashat, which means simple and literal. So Matthew 12, verse 18 to 21 is a literal prophecy that is found literally in Isaiah chapter 42. Quote, "Behold, my servant whom I have chosen, my beloved in whom my soul is well pleased. I will put my spirit upon him, and he will declare justice to the Gentiles. He will not quarrel, nor cry out, nor will anyone hear his voice in the streets. A bruised reed he will not break, and smoking flax he will not quench, till he sends forth justice to victory. And in his name, believe you me, the Gentiles will trust." I added that little phrase. The next section, isn't it wonderful how the New Testament quotes that Old Testament? And all these are prophetic verses written hundreds and hundreds of years before Jesus came. And he fulfilled over 100 specific prophecies in the Old Testament. Little details, little things, but add it all up, and you have a marvelous, we have a marvelous Bible, which is a wonder because it is so prophetic. Next, Jesus chooses the 12. He finishes his selection of his apostles. It was at this point in his ministry and career that Jesus closed the apostolic group of 12. That there were only 12 men in this group may be based on the 12 tribes of Israel. So out of many curious would-be disciples, and after an all-night prayer vigil, Luke chapter 6, verse 12, Jesus chose 12 specific men for three reasons. First, quote, that they might be with him. That's Mark 3:14. Jesus would now have a closed group of 12 men who would be with him at all times, while the other disciples, like the 70 mentioned in Luke chapter 10, would be on call and come and go. Second reason, Mark 3:14 says, ongoing, quote, that he might send them forth to preach. So Jesus gave these men the special ministry of proclaiming him as king and offering the kingdom to Israel. Third, quote, to have authority to cast out demons. That's Mark 3:15. While this authority was not given to all believers at this point, but only to the apostolic group of 12, it will be expanded to others later. Luke's makes a distinction in Luke 6:13. Quote, and when it was day, he called his disciples to himself. From them he chose 12, whom he also named apostles. So out of many disciples, Jesus selected only 12, and only those he called apostles. So the word disciple merely means a learner. It was used of a follower of a rabbi. By itself, the term disciple carries no implication of authority, but the word apostle does. It means a sent one. While the disciple did not carry any authority, the apostle had the authority of the sender. In Mark chapter 3 and Luke chapter 6, both list the 12 apostles, some of whom had more than one name. Each will be discussed individually. The first apostle is Peter. Now, in Hebrew, his name was Shimon, Simon in English. In Aramaic, and this is where all these different names come from, they're different in different languages. His name was Kepha, but in English, Cephas. His Greek name is Petros, and that's where we get Peter. Plain and simple, let's just call him Peter. But these other names are applicable to him. And all three of the names, there's even more than three names, but all of the three names, Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek, all three of those names are associated with a stone or a rock. The second apostle was Andrew. In Hebrew, that's Andre. The third apostle is John in English, Yohanan in Hebrew, which means Yahweh is gracious. He was the son of Salome and Zebedee. They have other names in Hebrew, Shulamit and Zavdi. Those are Hebrew names of Salome and Zebedee. Sorry, I don't mean to confuse you. The fourth, just to mention, just so for you to understand, when you see these names, Dr. I'm going to forget. All the names are Hebrew, are encouraged for us to learn. But that gets more complicated for us simple English folk. The fourth apostle is John's brother. That's the third apostle is John. Now, the fourth apostle is John's brother, James. That's simple in English. But let's just say in Hebrew, his name is Yaakov. Also Jacob, right? Yaakov. And in Greek, his name is Jakobos. And this is what the original text reads in Greek, Jakobos. How did Yaakov become James? Is that the Greek was rendered into Latin. Latin was then rendered into Spanish. Make a long story short here. And from the Spanish, which is the form of Jamie, not pronouncing that probably Spanish-wise, but the earliest English translation often relied on Latin and other European languages like Spanish. But in English, his name is James. James for us in the New Testament. But that is the same as Jacob of the Old Testament, Yaakov. So, but whenever Yaakov is translated in the Old Testament, the English is Jacob. But in the New Testament, that name is James. So they're not confused. The fifth apostle was Philip. Philip. That's Philippos in Greek. The sixth apostle was Nathaniel. Nathaniel, that's Hebrew, meaning the gift of God. In John chapter 1, verse 45, he also went by the name of Bartholomew. You see that in Matthew 10, verse 3, Mark 3, verse 18, Luke 6, verse 14, and Acts 1:13, which is not really a name but a title. Bartholomew means son of Talmai. His full name and title in Hebrew is Nathaniel Bartalmai, or in English, Nathaniel Bartholomew. The seventh apostle is Thomas. Toma in Hebrew, Didymus in Greek, and both in Hebrew and Greek, his name means twin. So Thomas was a twin of someone else, not any of the apostles, I believe. The eighth apostle was Matthew. But that's English, right? Mattai in Hebrew. Also known as Levi, the son of Alphaeus. Or we in English say Levi, son of Alphaeus. But in Hebrew, his father's name was Halphi. Halphi in Hebrew. So Levi, the son of Halphi, was his original name. But when he became a believer, his name changed to Mattai, a short form of the name Mattayahu. Mattayahu. Sounds like Netanyahu, doesn't it, a little bit? Meaning the gift of Yahweh. The ninth apostle was another Yaakov, or Jacob, or James. But he was also a son of Alphaeus, but not the same as Matthew's father. Okay, Matthew, his father's name was Alphaeus as well. And now here, the ninth apostle is another Yaakov, James, or Jacob. His father was Alphaeus, but not the same as Matthew's father. Okay, so Halphi was a common Hebrew name at that time. Okay, that's the ninth. Ninth apostle was James, another James. James, the son of Alphaeus. Okay, Let's move on. The 10th apostle was Judas in English. Judas, the brother of James. Okay, let's find James. James was the previous. The 9th apostle was James. And now Judas is a brother of James. The 10th apostle is Judas, the brother of the 9th apostle, James. Okay, so Judas is English. Judas is a Hellenized or Greek form of Yehuda, and it is the same name as the 4th son of Jacob. Judah, the lion of the tribe of Judah, which is Jesus, came from that descendancy. So this disciple also went by the name of Thaddeus in English, in Hebrew, Taddai. So his actual name in Hebrew is Yehuda ben Taddai, the 10th apostle. That is James, the son of Alphaeus. Okay. The 11th disciple was another Simon, Shimon. He was called Simon the Zealot. So he was of the Zealot party. They were a very extreme Pharisee. Okay, and they were in opposition to Roman rule aggressively. Okay, and we know that the Zealots brought the nation into war and instigated the first Jewish revolt in AD 66 to 70. In some translations, Simon the Zealot is also called a Canaanite, but ignore that because that is a misreading of the Greek text. Okay. In Aramaic, the term zealot, here we have Simon the Zealot, right, is ha-kanai. That's where they got Canaanite from, which was a misreading. Okay, we'll go on. Okay, the 12th apostle is always listed last, is Judas Iscariot in English. Yehuda, again, Judas, Yehuda, Ishkariot. Ishkariot means a man of the town of Kriot, which was located in southern Judah. So names in that age had to do with their location or their heritage. So he was a man of the town of Kriot, and Kriot is not Galilean. He's the only apostle not from Galilee. All the rest were. But that name is also very interesting because there are other possibilities as to the meaning of this name. In Aramaic, it could indicate that Judas was a tanner by trade. Also, more curious is that a different form of the same Aramaic root means, quote, strangulation. So this could indicate that he was given that name because he was killed by strangulation. That's pretty wild. Okay, a quote from the Mishnah, just to change the subject a bit. There are 903 species of death were created in this world. The worst of them is the croup, but the easiest of them is a kiss. So interesting. And I wonder right now, thinking, Jesus was betrayed with a kiss. The kiss of Judas. So within the apostolic group of 12, there's symmetry, okay? There are 3 sets of brothers. The first set is Simon and Andrew, who were both sons of John. The second set of brothers was James and John. They were sons of Salome. Salome was the sister of Mary, the mother of Jesus, making her Jesus's aunt. So James and John are Jesus's cousins. And Jesus gave these 2 brothers the nickname sons of thunder, or emotion, sons of emotion. The third set of brothers was James and Judas, the sons of Alphaeus. James and Judas, the sons of Alphaeus. So in addition to the 3 sets of brothers, there were 2 extreme factions, right? Matthew was the publican. Simon the zealot was a zealot. And they usually don't mix very well. The zealots were inclined to kill publicans because they went with Rome. But it just indicates that only Jesus could bring such a diverse group together and get them to work alongside each other. So altogether, there are 4 listings of the 12 apostles in all 4 Gospels. But how are their names reflected in the order? Well, Dr. Fruchtenbaum studies that. The first name, Simon, we know him as Peter, is the same in all 4 Gospels. He's always listed first. But the second and third and fourth names are mixed. They're not always the same order. The 5th name, Philip, is always the 5th name throughout all 4 Gospels, while the 6th, 7th, and 8th name are mixed. The 9th name, James, the son of Alphaeus, is the same all across the 4 Gospels, while the 10th and 11th names are mixed. So we know that Judas Iscariot is always mentioned last and placed there because of his betrayal. Now, what all this may indicate is that within the apostolic group of 12, there were 3 divisions, 3 sets of 4. And the first name of each division was the leader, okay? Each division had 4 disciples, and one was the lead, the head. Simon Peter was the head of the first. In his group is James, John, and Andrew. Philip was the head of the second, with Bartholomew, Matthew, and Thomas under him. And James, the son of Alphaeus, is the head of the third group, with Thaddeus and Simon the Zealot and Judas Iscariot under him. So those are the 12 disciples and the intrigue of all their names. So I will stop right here. We are going to be beginning the Sermon on the Mount next. So thank you very much. Have a great day. God bless you.